I will call the meeting to order at 3:30 p.m. Roll call and certification of quorum. Madam Secretary, I certify I have a quorum present as all council members are present. ENZ?
Yes, sir. All of them are present except for Commissioner Ordino. So we got 6 of us here.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate you. Moving on to citizen comments and to comply with the provisions of Texas Open Meetings Act. City Council may not deliberate on any item not listed on the agenda. However, City Council will listen to public comment. During public comment, the public shall comply with the Council's rules of decorum. Everyone desiring to present comment should have completed the public hearing comment card in the foyer, submitted to the City Secretary at the podium, and each participant shall give his or her name, provide a proper record, and then rules allow for 3 minutes for personal and 5 minutes for group. And I encourage everyone to please be brief and as to the point as possible. Mayor Pro Tem Chavarria, would you mind calling any speakers?
We don't have any at this time.
Okay. So guess we're moving on. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, but this is for discussion item 1. I believe you guys are discussion item 2, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, thank you.
So moving on to item of new business. That would be regarding the UDC updates. Staff, you have an update?
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. All right, so today we are going to showcase a similar workshop format that we conducted a few weeks ago. This is to work towards our upcoming UDC update, and rather than attempting to cover full chapters or numerous topics, this workshop is going to focus on 1 or possibly 2 items to allow for deeper discussion and clearer policy direction. And again, this is not the last workshop we will have. This is going to be staff-led and design workshop. The consultant is not going to be in attendance for these ones, but staff is going to lead those. And so today we are going to be talking about the triggers table as well as the Broadway expansion trigger table potentially. And so the workshop format is broken up into 2 parts. We're going to start with the trigger table that we have currently in Chapter 4. And then we're going to move on to the Broadway expansion. So I'm going to pause in the middle to allow for feedback and discussion regarding the current trigger table in Chapter 4, and then we'll move on. So what is the triggers table? It is a section in Chapter 4 that is called Improvements and Related Triggers, and they've been a part of the UDC since 2007. The last update was in 2018 that discussed paved area and expansion thresholds. So the triggers table outlines when an expansion to an existing developed property results in improvements being required. And again, it's aimed at existing development rather than new development. So the trigger table that we have today encompasses facade materials, sidewalks, parking, landscaping, and screening and fencing. So here's what the table looks like that is part of Chapter 4. I would like to note 2 items on the top row. Underneath sidewalks, farthest to the right, you can see the word no is crossed out, and that is a typo that is currently existing in our triggers table. That it does state in Chapter 3 of the Unified Development Code that when you do have an expansion of paved area over 5,000 square feet, sidewalks are required. As well as under the dumpster screening, where you see change of use and the star next to the word yes, there is a bit of a discrepancy in the table where it states a dumpster screening is required when there is an expansion, but it does not state that a dumpster screening requirement is triggered when a change of use occurs. So that kind of transitions into why we're here, as there is some conflicting messaging in this table that staff is reviewing, and the applicant or a developer or anyone wants to read the Unified Development Code may have difficulties kind of coming to a conclusion of what's actually required and what's not required. And so today, this table breaks down the action, which is on the left side of the page, talking about expansion of paved area, cumulative expansion of a building more than 15% with a 500 square foot minimum, cumulative expansion of a building less than 15% with a 500 square foot minimum, a change of use, or a change of occupant. And then there's different actions: facade, parking, dumpster screening, landscaping, fencing, sidewalks. And so I wanted to showcase an example of the triggers table in action. So this property is along Broadway, and it used to be the Cons Home Plus, and recently the land use was changed to a gym. And so when we look at the triggers table under the change of use action, you can see that facade is a yes. And so the facade requirement in the corridor overlay district needs 25% transparency for a building. And so when we look at cons, we do not have 25% currently. And so the Crunch Fitness was required to meet 25% transparency or go to the Zoning Board of Adjustments. This property did end up going to the Zoning Board of Adjustment and received approval for 13.6% transparency. And that is what you see on the picture on the right side today. Additionally, this property had the landscaping that you see on the top, and through an expansion of the other multi-tenant building where the Pizza Hut is located, the city and the applicant worked together to have them enhance their landscaping along Broadway, and that's what you see here today. That's kind of an example of the triggers table in action. So the planning division is working with our stakeholder group and having virtual meetings to discuss upcoming workshops to obtain their feedback to insert into the slide deck. And so there was a virtual meeting held with them on the 1st of June, and the stakeholder feedback regarding the trigger table in Chapter 4, actually they wanted to have any upgrade, change of use, change of occupant, including enhancing the dumpster screening and fencing upgrades, as well as identifying that improving general access, connectivity, and ADA accessibility was a priority for them, but also noting that maybe a change of occupant should only be required for franchise commercial property instead of mom and pop. And so this is a table with revisions with staff and the stakeholder group. The stakeholder group is colored in blue, and the bold is an identifier that states there was a change to the current trigger table to this potentially proposed trigger table. So again, the blue yeses mean that the stakeholder group had this as a priority. So when we're talking about accessibility, connectivity, there is an assumption that that connects with them wanting sidewalks, regardless of what actions taken, as well as the dumpster screening and the fencing requirement. And the red is what the city staff came up with. So when I look at the trigger table, a question that I could ask the group is, do we feel that a change of occupant is or should go through a sidewalk? So a simple change of occupancy permit. I'm Katja's Auto Repair, and it's going to be Josh's Auto Repair. Should Josh have to install sidewalks along the property if there isn't sidewalks currently? Do they need to increase their fencing? Do they need to increase or verify and reinstall their landscaping, as well as enhance their dumpster screening if there is not screening today? And do they need to potentially increase their facade if the building has been abandoned by more than 6 months? So these are kind of the questions. Where is the threshold? Where is it too much? Where is it too little? That we'd like to talk to you all about. Also, should facade be only limited to corridor overlay? Yes, because there was a state law that shared that we can no longer enhance materials for properties. However, we do have an exception along the corridor overlay district properties that have building articulation and building transparency requirements. There is a paper in front of most of y'all. Happy to go over this further. But again, those are some of the thoughts and questions that we have for the group today. What is the primary purpose of the triggers table, and how should they serve City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission's opinion? How does the current table appropriately balance redevelopment incentives with community expectations? Are there certain triggers that feel too aggressive or discourage reinvestment and redevelopment? Are there triggers that are too lenient and allow sites to remain visually or functioning nonconformity for long periods? Does the current table create confusion for applicants, developers, or staff? And what outcome would the City Council and the Planning and Zoning Commission like to see in 10 years because of the triggers table? So I'm going to pause here. I'm going to leave the screen on the proposed trigger table, and I'll pass it back to you, Mayor. Thank you.
And at this time, I'd like to hand it over back to P&Z for any discussions, questions.
Okay, Commissioner Hendricks here. My concern is where TxDOT is widening 518, having them change the facade or meet some of the parking requirements is going to be a challenge. And so some of these uses may have to change because businesses they may not be in a position to continue in their current location because of the widening. So what are we doing about those locations?
So this trigger table, one, I do think that is a great question. This trigger table is focused on the entirety of Pearland, not just focused on Broadway expansion. But I think a great question as where is the threshold? What is too aggressive? What is too lenient? What do the City Council and the Planning and Zoning Commission want to see as far as incremental improvements to sites that have existing nonconformities and have had existing nonconformities for a long time?
And my other question is on the facade requirements, if it's been abandoned for more than 6 months, I'm not sure I have enough information about, is that even feasible for buildings that, like you showed that example of the Crunch Fitness, was that, you take a building like that, is that even feasible to change the facade to the window requirement? So I don't know that I could support that without knowing how that would impact a retail owner, obviously all over Pearland, not just this one location. How would they go back and re-engineer the building to meet the transparency? Are there more examples of this where we say, hey, at this location we could make this look better if we enacted this table?
So I'm going to jump in real quick. On the trigger table for the TxDOT portion of it, the second half of the presentation is actually the triggers related improvements for the TxDOT nonconformities created. And also, just while I'm talking on that subject, it really needs to be even greater than TxDOT, and just saying it because I think we need to say it more often, but it really needs to be just nonconformities created by takings or projects in general. I think that's more of what we should get comfortable with when it comes to that trigger table, but that's going to be the second half of the presentation. And then when it comes to this specific example, I would say we've actually seen several change of uses here in the last year or so where they have come in, and most of them do opt to go to ZBA to try and get out of the transparency requirement. We've seen kind of a mixed bag of success there. We've seen situations like this where it was reduced. We've seen situations where it was denied. And so, but right now, if you come in and you're a change of use along our corridor overlay, the transparency requirement applies, and then it would be on the applicant or the property owner to permit and get the appropriate plans to install the required transparency.
I think that looking at it from when they go and you're changing windows and you're changing the actual architectural design of the building, I'm not sure that the ZBA board is qualified to say, yes, this is going to work, or it's feasible or it's not feasible. My concern is, how does that work from a structural engineering standpoint? Like, who's making this decision that you can actually change those buildings without changing the structure of the building? So I think I would want to know more. I think to send it to ZBA board, like if they say, hey, we got denied at ZBA, but this actually does not work. Do we have something in place where the structural and the architect could come in and say, this is not feasible for this building?
Yeah, so through the, or yes, ma'am, through the permitting process, we wouldn't just let them knock out a wall and put up glass if it was had structural integrity. It would go through the appropriate review and have to have design professionals to ensure structural integrity that supports the transparency as well.
But what I'm saying is if that doesn't work, do we have something in place that if the ZBA denied them, they can continue using the building?
If ZBA denied them, I would say no, but also, so in my time, I've been doing this for about 15 years, and I've never seen a situation where there wasn't an architectural or engineered solution that would work.
Commissioner Hendricks, if you fail at the ZBA, the only recourse you have is to sue the city, and you have to do it in district court within 10 days of your denial. That's how you resolve it, just to let you know.
Yeah, I mean, that would just be my only feedback concern about that is taking an existing design building and changing it, and I just think that opens up a lot of liability because number one, when you start changing features on a building, you don't always have existing building plans. We're in a wind zone area. I'm just not sure I'm comfortable with that, but that's just my feedback.
I don't have any specific comments at the moment, but I do believe that as we redevelop, we should be leveraging that to improve some of these properties and bringing them into compliance. I think it's our opportunity to kind of at least influence some consistent character throughout the city. And I know we're looking for a threshold. I don't have any specific numbers, but smaller developments, smaller impacts, and then your larger developments should have those larger impacts. So that's all I have right now.
Thank you. Agree with Jennifer. I'm sorry, Commissioner Hendricks. Apologies. This is tough. I mean, this had a chairman of the P&Z back in 2008, 9 or 10. Familiar last name as one of our council members. And his take was always that I'd rather have a building that's vacant being used than remain vacant. And I think there's a few of those buildings along Broadway. There's a couple on Telephone Road that with a little bit of help or maybe some of the rule changes, we could have some occupancy in those buildings. Or they're going to be tear downs. At some point, the market will, speak to that building, and it'll be a tear down. So I'm kind of torn between that. Do we want to help a less than beautiful building remain less than beautiful, or do you keep the rules like that, or do you allow for maybe even assistance with the city or EDC to get some grant money to help them out? As for takings, that was mentioned, I really do feel strongly that the city should not, let me start over. If the city takes X amount of feet away from a landowner, to then say a building is not in conformance because it doesn't meet the setback requirements is not fair. I'm all for fairness of a landowner, and if they give the land up or sell the land to the city for a road or to any governmental entity, I think that they should be grandfathered in from a setback standpoint, if that's the only issue. My concern also now with moving to the next topic, ZBA, my concern is that the ZBA is the final word. You know, if we make a bad decision, council has a second look at it. You all have overturned us a few times here in the last 6 months, and you're right, that's your duty, that's your prerogative. I understand that. But my concern is just what Councilmember Koza said here just a few minutes ago. if the ZBA denies and the applicant wishes to pursue further, they have to go to court and sue the city, and that's could be an expensive process for the city or for the applicant itself. So, would certainly like these like a method to claw back, or for the applicants and for the city itself to have a second look at it. And thank you.
Okay, I agree with what Commissioner Fuentes said. Is there any way that we could have two different sections for a certain size, or I know that out there on not on Broadway, but out there on Main Street, several years ago, we had somebody that wanted to upgrade their building and do some things. And the city got involved with it, and his $25,000 upgrade jumped up to $80,000, $90,000. He just couldn't afford to do it. So he left it the same size and continued to do his business out of there at that time. I think that if we are having somebody that wants to do some things, I agree with the commissioner when he said that maybe the EDC or something could maybe get involved and try to help him. I thought that was probably, part of the purpose of the EDC is maybe to help some of those, or help them find a way to do it anyway. But that's really all I've got to say. I mean, this is a really hard thing I know it's for us and for y'all. It's a hard decision to make, because you want the businesses in there, you want the buildings to look good, and we're in an old section of town. And, and if it's a big corporate chain or something like that, most of the time they got deep enough pockets that they can do what they want to do. But when it's Joe the Ragman out there trying to upgrade his business and stuff like that, he doesn't always have those deeper pockets. So we got one more commissioner with.
Yep. Sorry. Two really quick. Can we define abandoned? Because I know some deals between previous landowners, building may be vacant, takes time to develop that, and if all of a sudden that six-month clock turns over, now he's got to go back to the drawing board because he's got to update. Yeah, there's possibly the appeal process, but maybe that needs to be done. And then do we differentiate between a leasee and a property owner in this regard? If I'm the leasee and I'm subject to this, is that beholden to the actual building owner to update? Or is that on individual leasees, or vice versa? If the leasee doesn't have the ability to do so, how do we differentiate and go on about there in regards to a strip center of that nature?
So when it comes to applying the triggers table, staff, that the abandoned or the ownership versus the tenant component, it's going to be between them and their private agreement financially in their lease. And so if they if the owner is such that he'll make the improvement for them, that's fine. Or if it's the other way around and the tenant feels like making the improvement, that's just between them privately to negotiate.
Commissioner Hendricks here. I have one more comment. We also, the second part of this, are we also including damage from wind, from hurricanes? Do we have something in place for that? Because if we got a large wind event here, my concern, it would affect a lot of buildings. So is there like evaluation of how much needs to change?
Yeah, I was just trying to think of how to answer that one. So twofold, I guess I'll say, there's the FEMA rule of 50%, and so there would be that, which would be a completely different animal. But all of our triggers and the improvements are always tied to something related to the improvement being made. And so if there was a wind damage to a building, they would most likely just be coming in for a limited scope. And so that probably wouldn't domino into some of these triggers, I wouldn't think. They wouldn't be expanding the building. They would be repairing something damaged, and that there's a strong chance it wouldn't open them up to some of these items.
That would be good if we could clarify that, because, flooding, wind, all that can cause a significant amount of damage potentially, and we wouldn't want to impact small business owners from having to go and make these major changes. I understand landscaping and sidewalk maybe, or dumpster screening, but some of the other stuff to bring them up to code, that would be my only concern, because the insurance is only going to pay them for what they had on the ground before, not for improved values.
Yeah, no, good comment. And again, not necessarily what the trigger table is about. It's more about expanding existing uses, not about repairing damage from a storm, but I think good clarity.
Okay, back to you, Mayor.
Appreciate it. Turn over to Councilmember Koza.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll come out straight out front. There's a little too much overreach in this trigger table. Point blank, period, end of story. Going to go through some examples. Can you bring the cons picture back up? I don't know how many parking spots y'all took away, but I know that Victor Brownlee's goes to eat in the cons parking lot quite a bit, and because I see him at Patera on a regular basis. And we actually screwed them, because there's absolutely no parking when Crunch came in. You can go by there any time of day, and we stripped probably 20 parking spots for plants. And I feel sorry for anybody right now. The addition that they added to that building, I would not want to rent there, because when you go there, there's no place to park, and it's horrible. So that's one. Two, there's an automotive company that's no longer in business that wanted to put a $10,000 roof on. And this is where this stuff gets into very much overreach. I don't see Matt Buchanan here, but what should be attached to this table right here is how much he's going to be willing to pay for all these changes. Because to bear this on a property owner that's been here for years is unacceptable. And Sims ended up having to spend $100,000 for a $10,000 roof. And that's just asinine. They wanted to fix a leaky roof so that their building didn't fall apart. And here this community says, I want your building to look better. That's unacceptable. You talk about storms coming through. Is Burger King sign still a billboard sign?
No, sir.
No, because the storm took it down and they couldn't replace it. Now they're putting down a monument. I think Jennifer or Commissioner Hendricks said, your insurance companies, when they want to come back and pay you for what was there, they want to pay you to replace, not pay you to redo and expend more money. If the city of Pearland and the EDC wants to pay for this, I'm all in. If the EDC doesn't, then you need to back off. And that's where I'm at.
Mayor Pro Tem Chavarria.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. So thank you so much for the presentation. I do want to say this. My concern is the impact that this will have on existing businesses, especially the mom and pops. I think that we really need to think about that. So I do think that we need to give some more thought to this. I mean, I think this is a great base, but I do think that we need to really take a look at it and be more thoughtful when we are on the guidelines that we want to present or approve. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Councilmember Byron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kind of going deliberately with your questions from your slide. My iPad went to sleep. What's the primary purpose of the trigger table? I would think the primary, just my opinion, the primary purpose of the trigger table would be to incentivize not having vacant buildings in our community. And I understand we want to have some consistency, but one of the things we all know and love about the city of Pearland is that it's a small town, that it's a big town that feels like a small town. And when you redevelop everything to look the same across the entire community, you lose the character that built this community over the last 50, 60, 70 years. And so I would want to look at ways that we would encourage people to be able to move into these buildings, that they don't have to completely overhaul them and change them from what they are. Especially some of the more unique buildings that we have in our community. If somebody changes, sorry, can you go back to the table? I've got the questions in front of me. I appreciate that. I'm trying to see both of them. So thank you very much. For example, on the change of occupant, same use, I wouldn't be looking for a facade change, period, whether it's been empty for 6 months or not, because it's the same function. That building was used for the same purpose for the lifetime of that building. I don't know why somebody coming in to use it for the same purpose again would have to go and completely change the exterior of the building in order to do that. Change of use, I could see some of these things being triggered from a change of use if that change does have a more intense traffic demand, so you're going to have more parking than the original use. I could see some of that going on, but definitely on the change of occupant side, I would be looking for more ways that we can encourage people to utilize our buildings. I did have a question because it was mentioned that some of these standards are somewhat onerous and are preventing people from moving into buildings. Do we have any data on that says, X number of buildings in our community have been vacant and are remaining vacant because buyers can't afford to update or anything like that? Have we heard any of that? I haven't. That's why I'm asking.
No, sir. Staff wouldn't have a metric on that.
Okay, fair enough. So that was one of my questions: is are our trigger tables actually keeping businesses from moving here? It's hard to know that. I don't know that anybody is going to call up and say, "Hey, I was looking at this building, but I'm not going to buy it because it's going to cost me this much." But Member Koza pointed out some specific situations you know of.
I'm familiar with a lease that in the lease it said if the city costs me more than this, they get to walk. This thing, if you want to work in the whole part of Pearland, it's a trap.
Well,
if the cities want to pay for it, let's go for it.
Well, and that's ultimately my point, right? Is we're talking about redevelopment structures. We're talking about older part of Pearland, older buildings. Different parts of Pearland are going to be dealing with this in another 15 or 20 years. And I just don't think we want to create a giant metric that gets rid of all of that character and that history and creates a uniformity through our entire city. I think we would want to protect that small town feel and that small town culture as much as we can. I think it is a little overboard in some areas. I know you guys are looking for maybe some more specifics on where those areas are rather than just general statements. So maybe we can send y'all some follow-up emails with more specifics on it if we don't have it today. But for me, specifically, like I mentioned, having to update the facade or adding dumpster screening. If you're trying to move into a business that was already there and you're trying to get on your feet, and the first thing you got to do is spend $15,000 on a dumpster just to be able to move into the building and use it for what it was originally built for, that gets really difficult to start your business. So the change of occupant, same use would be an area that I would be very flexible with people on, not adding a bunch of weight.
Councilmember Cade.
Thank you. Vance, facade, under facade it says in parentheses for COD. What is COD?
Sorry, that's Corridor Overlay District.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry, I could not come up with it. For facade, I would not be change of use or change of occupant. I don't see the need to change facade. Now, for dumpster screening, I do like the idea of that. But if we're going to ask businesses to do that, the city's going to do that also. I can think of some dumpsters that need to be screened. All right. If now the screening, the facade, that's the one that stands out the most to me. and the crunch parking is terrible. You cannot go there. And Councilmember Koza is right about that. We've almost got killed trying to go to the UPS store. So whatever we did for that and took away parking places, that was a mistake. And the sidewalks, how many of those did we change, did you say? The ones in blue are all changed?
Yes, ma'am. So the bold blue text is a suggestion by our stakeholder group saying that they were wanting more accessibility, they were wanting more connectivity and ADA accessibility. And so in a response to that, with this draft table, we changed the no's to yeses in the bold blue.
And that's all on the business owner. It seems like a lot.
That's correct. And that's why this table is in front of y'all, to have this discussion on what is too aggressive and what may be too lenient and what makes sense to change as far as a typo goes from chapter 2 to chapter 3 to this table. So that's why this is up, is to have these types of conversations.
Yeah, I agree with some of the other council members that have said it seems a little burdensome. Thank you.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Thank you, Mayor. When I look at this table, there are 30 different areas that we're looking at. Out of 30, 3 say no. This is more towards how can the city focus on the city to do what the city wants to do. And I like that this is a discussion, so I'm going to make it very crystal clear. This is not looking at small business and what it's going to impact them. I think that the costs are going to be outrageous. I've actually heard, if I heard correctly, that between one of the commissioners and Vance speak about that, it depends on the agreement of the contract. Bottom line, triple net would go up if the business, the property owners have to, if they're forced to have to do certain things to their property. So at the end of the day, it's going to affect the tenants. So at the end of the day, it's just going to trickle down. I think that we need to look at ways, creative ways. I like the idea of the EDC. If that is something that can be looked into, that's one. The other thing is maybe having a table talking about the age of the development. Do we have to change a facade or change certain things if the age of the property is not that old, but yet we're trying to find that balance. We're trying to find old developments and what can we do to update those developments. But while we're trying to be inviting for small businesses to decide to come to Pearland. And so I think that we need to take a step back on, what the city wants and what is best for the small businesses, being considerate, trying to, find ways to help the burden that's going to be placed upon them. Later in this workshop, we're going to talk about the expansion of 518, and you're going to hear me talk about a little bit more about the small businesses, and we'll talk about that at that time. But looking at these questions, does it impact? Is it too aggressive? Yes. I think that the tables is very aggressive. I see so many yeses, 3 no's out of the whole thing, and I think we need to do a better job looking at others, looking at the business owners, looking at people that are working extremely hard with their business. And some people, it may come easy, and then some people, it's going to be hard for them to come up with the dollars. So maybe we have to find ways to get creative. Is it the grants, like one of the commissioners had spoken about, or if it's us finding other ways? But looking at this table, I think we've got a lot of work to do in that table. Thank you, Mayor.
Not a problem, Councilmember Patel.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you tell me who the stakeholders were? How did you find these stakeholders?
They're members of the community and people who have interest in Pearland.
And the stakeholder group was a group formed off of members that both P&Z and City Council emailed staff to reach out to.
So I'm just curious, how many of them were there?
So on this call, last week or the week before, there was right at or just under 17.
Any of them are business owners, or were they all just citizens?
No, it's business owners and developers.
Okay. And I must have missed that memo, so I apologize. I guess, I will echo what my council member said earlier, but I would ask you, if you go back to the all the yeses and no, well, 3 no's according to council member Fernandez. What I would ask, and I think I would concur with what Member Koza said. I wish Matt was here. We used to, and I have said this before to Trent, we used to have a specific grant in the old town site by EDC. We used to have a specific grant for exactly this, to help small business pay for this. And I would challenge, Trent, you and your team, to go back to the EDC, allocate funds specifically for this if you guys want this. I don't think the idea is bad. I think, if I remember, Mona, you may be able to help me. I think the maximum we would pay was $50,000 on facade grant, or 50% of the cost, one of the lower off. And we had some wins. We actually had some small businesses take advantage of that. And as a board member, we had specifically asked EDC to say, we want to do this. We want the corridors to look certain ways. And I would say, let us go back to the EDC and ask them to specifically put it in their line item. God knows they have the manpower to go out there and help these small businesses instead of always focusing on the big boxes. Second thing I would ask is, second thing I would say to you is, I think part of this is great, the landscaping and all of that is wonderful. When I look at in front of Crunch, and I don't drive there every day, but when I do, part of the problem is we may make them do it today, but then the trees will die and we don't do anything about it. Or the trees are overgrown, we don't do anything about it. So if we're gonna force them to spend the money today, then let's make sure that we maintain that. So if we are not going to maintain our rules that force them to do certain things, then there's no point of doing it. So I would, again, I think it is a lot for small business and even large businesses. It's just, you can't just say small business, even large businesses. It is a cost, because all that's going to do is pass the cost on to the consumer.
Councilmember Koza.
Thank you, Mayor. Rushi, just to kind of tag on to that, or Member Patel, I think if we require something because of age or because of certain things, the EDC should pay for it 100%, and you'll see this thing flip to no's. It'll be 3 yeses and all the rest no's. But with that being said, I'm aware of another one that, so let's talk about sidewalks, Vance. You have an open ditch. How do you put a sidewalk over an open ditch? Is the city going to close that ditch so that the landowner can put sidewalks in?
I believe in that situation, probably would take advantage of the fee in lieu option.
Okay, but to me, the city should enclose the ditch. I don't quite understand when it comes time for the city to spend money, we back away. But yet, when we want to require a landowner to do it, we're full steam ahead. Because if the landowner doesn't want to pay the fee, how many times do they have to pay the fee? If they would rather have sidewalks out there, why doesn't the city do their job and enclose the ditch? Probably because it costs money. So this bracket, or this table right here, I'm pretty familiar with, and I know you know that I'm familiar with it. There is a part to this that's not here. And basically, when I got familiar with this table, there was some overriding statements. One of them about dumpster screen. And City Attorney Coker's no longer with us, so Lawrence from legal probably is not aware of this. Maybe he is, I don't know. But basically, there were some overriding statements in a subsequent paragraph. And when I got my education with this and inquired, does the subsequent paragraph supersede this, or does this paragraph supersede that? What Darren Coker explained to me is that the UDC was not here to penalize existing business. And the reason the comments below superseded this, because it was a change of use where it was a dumpster screen. And when you went to look at the tagline or the asterisk, whatever you want to say, and you went down, it said that the dumpster screen did not need this. But our planning department wanted it. So Darren had to go explain to the planning department that that's fine. If you want to write a citation, you're gonna do that. The landowner is gonna take that citation and go to court. And when they go to court, this one line right here that I don't see in this presentation, we're gonna lose. And I don't see that anywhere in here. So I'll go right back to where I started off. We need to go back and wipe the slate clean. And if we want more no's in here, require the city to pay for it.
Councilman Barham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did want to add, I do like the going back, and it dovetails a little bit with what Member Patel was talking about, going back to the required landscaping when the development was approved in the first place to ensure, as it's changing hands, they're getting their new certificate of occupancy. It was on the, number 6 on there. Previous landscaping must be verified. I think that's important because, to Member Patel's point, I do hear that pretty frequently, that put a lot of money into these early on when they have to put them in to get their COs and be able to occupy their space and operate. Same thing with multifamily. That's a big one. It looks really, really nice, and then 5 years later it doesn't. And so putting that in there to make sure that that is being reevaluated and evaluated on a regular basis, because if that's going to be part of our code, we need to keep it up. But I liked seeing that in there, so I appreciate that.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
So we hear you loud and clear. I have the current triggers table on the screen right now. Would the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council be interested in the triggers table update essentially being a kind of like a typo grammar fixing, a fixer-upper, plus maybe changing some of the existing yeses to nos? Because some of these do have typos in them, so maybe just fixing those grammatical errors and making sure that the table is understandable for staff, applicant, and reader, but not necessarily changing current yeses or current nos to the other word. Or would you like for us to further make yeses into nos in addition to the grammatical corrections?
Yeah, and so just to appreciate that, and just to, so this is how it's currently adopted straight out of the code, minus the 2 or 3 sections that you were referencing, Member Koza. But this is the language in its almost entirely. And so you can see the number of no's has changed. The other version is the one that included stakeholder and potential draft language that we could move to. But you see now a little more, what you may think is a little more balanced view. And this is as it exists today, what staff uses today, right now. And also just to mention something, the triggers table's purpose is about incrementally working towards more compliant products. And from the facade piece, you know, the facade portion only applies to corridor overlay districts. And while those are major roads, it's only 14 of the roads in town is in the corridor overlay district. So it's not every street in town has to do this. But even then, again, it's about a balanced incremental improvement. And private development funding, making your city look nice, is development 101 and it's cities 101. Whenever a new neighborhood gets built, cities don't put in that infrastructure, private developers do. And so it is that balance between, no, we do want nice things here, and trying to find a way of like, we are glad you're here. We want you to be here. We want you to grow. And we also want certain things to look a certain way. But facade, no one's going through Old Town and saying, hey, you're this building, you got to look this way now. There's no ability like that.
A lot of the oldest buildings reside on 35, and you're going to go in and tell them that they got to take it over and revamp it just because they're on the major street, that's what it was when this town was founded or prior to. And we don't do the same zest or zeal in dumpy, crappy homes either. And we've got those in town too.
I wonder, is there any room for common sense on this? Because recently there was a small business owner or a resident who was doing something on a street that's about to be widened, and she had to put a sidewalk into nowhere. It's literally just a piece of a sidewalk it attaches to no other sidewalk, and it's on a street that's about to be widened, and it's going to take out that sidewalk, and it cost her $15,000. So I'm just curious, is there...
So in a situation like that, the goal would be for staff to be aware of it and for them to pay into the sidewalk fund. And then when the widening occurs, the sidewalk to get put in there. Unfortunately, if they did put it in and it will be removed, what I would say is it'll get put back, unfortunately. But ideally, it'd get caught during plan review. They'd pay to the sidewalk fee fund. And then when the CIP project comes through, assuming that's what it was, they would do the project and include the sidewalk there.
Councilmember Echols.
Thank you, team, for presenting this today. Thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity to speak. When I sit at this dais, I have to be an advocate for our people, for our residents, for our businesses. This table 4.1, it has overreach in it. For what we see at the crunch, removing 24 parking spots for grass that you have to mow and maintain, to me is ludicrous. So this 4.1 is still a little overreaching. I think with taxes in mind, we need businesses to keep our residents' taxes down for the businesses to help pay our budget. And for us to have this kind of overreach for businesses, we're driving them out, not driving them in. We have a parking lot on a said corner, Pearland Parkway, in Berry Rose. It's a parking lot for nothing because this 4.1 changed a corporation's mindset on whether or not they wanted to change locations. And that's the eyesore we have to see every day. I say not only go back to 4.1, I say let's go 4.1 minus with some more no's and let businesses thrive in Pearland. That's what we need to do. Let businesses thrive in Pearland. To put green space instead of parking, I don't understand. To put trees in parking that birds will be flying and putting excrement on your vehicle, on your windshield, is ludicrous. Yes, there needs to be some landscaping, I don't mind, but putting trees for shade or for looks, let's bring some common sense. As Councilmember Cade just said, is there any room? I think there is some room. So thank you much.
I do have some questions. We're about to head into the next section, which details 518. And I noticed it said Broadway Overlay District. And I hear all my fellow councilmen concerns. I think sometimes they're addressed a bit in the nuances of the specific areas. And I just want to remind everybody, this is a unified development code that seeks to explain how we want businesses overall to be brought up to certain standards as they expand, that's not able to encompass every specific grievance within those businesses that are looking to expand. But perhaps, and I'm not sure the answer, but that's why we're having this discussion, is to how can we update this and incorporate some of the impacts we'll have to local businesses while still maintaining the appeal that we understand we want Pearland to be. I will remind some of our council members that specifically we have a major investment called the Old Town Revitalization. And the main purpose, from my understanding of this revitalization, is that for periods of longevity, we have not updated most of these areas within this facility, in this region. And so I think the Unified Development Code trigger table is meant to, over time, help us to not be in a position where we're investing tons of money into areas that we will look to improve and take a different approach to that. So the question is, since we have the Broadway Overlay District, are we able to incorporate into future upgrades for expansion in the Unified Development Code some sort of district or district planning so that we aren't as burdensome to businesses in certain parts of town, but still get and achieve the same thing we're looking for as to bring the appeal and the look up to code? Is that possible?
Yeah, I think that could be a possibility for us to look into, maybe excluding Old Town from certain triggers and then looking at our corridor overlay district roadways if we want to stick to more of the 4.1 or if we want to even further decrease the trigger requirements for improvements. We can definitely look at that.
I think, I think to all my council members, I think that's what I hear them saying is that because some of them have experienced this firsthand, some of the challenges in trying to grow their businesses and feeling the impacts. So I think if we could somehow incorporate a trigger table, because Pearland has grown so much. I mean, there's different areas across, and we want to make sure we bring our city up to like market standards, our current standards. And then also in these codes, in these tables, are there any time stamps? So if a business looks to expand, is there some type of time impact that is placed upon them that they need to perform these upgrades? So for example, if I expand my business and I trigger an impact or something, do I have to invest all those dollars up front to come up to these standards, or is it over time?
If you need to pull a building permit, you will apply for that building permit, and then you'll have some time to do the improvements that are necessary. However, if you have to have an occupancy permit, you must have those improvements completed before you receive occupancy.
Yeah,
Vance,
so
I see you on the mic.
Yeah, it's with the project you're doing. So if you came in to expand or whatever the scope of work was, you part of that scope you came in would have to meet whatever the trigger table requirements are at that time.
Okay. Any other questions?
Comment, just to,
Absolutely.
just to kind of shed some of the burden that anyone that lives outside of the TERS, just to let you know that basically anytime I've asked, when the TERS goes away, we're due about a 10-cent drop in our tax rate. For 30 years, anybody that doesn't live in the TERS has been subsidizing the other end of the town. So when we go in and look at trying to say we need to be unified, then we need to also look at the investment that's put into a part of a city.
I would just,
because that right there is 10 cents.
I would just remind the council member that there are retail taxes spread across this entire city
I understand
that
this
go
is
to invest
property.
Across this entire city.
This is property taxes, sir. I can tell you there are businesses that sell outside the city of Pearland that sales tax come into that not a citizen pays for, okay? So that's one thing that you need to look at, that for 30 years, a major part of the city has been subsidizing another part.
I don't think we can categorize it that way, but I do take your point. Moving on.
Okay. All right, let's talk Broadway. Okay, so this Second topic is the Broadway expansion nonconformities discussion. This topic is important to Pearland because we do have a large project, a widening project along Broadway Street, and the goal of the discussion or the outcome would be to craft a process or overlay where sites affected can incrementally be brought into compliance. And for some of our new members, we have discussed the Broadway expansion. This will be our third discussion to talk about this. We talked about this on April 14th and December 15th of 2025. And so a summary of some of the comments that were made during those two discussions were defining the overall intent of Broadway nonconformities, supportive of if X then Y situations, noting that we should not grandfather the corridor, and for new development to follow the Unified Development Code, having questions about detention requirements and what processes apply when there is no space for incremental compliance. Finally, potentially adding in a residential nonconformity section, and there were questions raised about shared parking and cross-access. And so today, we want to talk about the widening project specifically regarding properties that have proposals for 10, 15 feet of acquisition, not necessarily talking about today the properties, the 15 to 16 properties that are being fully acquired. We're talking about the properties that are being acquired 10 to 15 feet and what that looks like and what we want to see with these properties moving forward. And so today there are no clear guidelines for bringing up nonconformities, and these properties do face challenges with complying with our current Unified Development Code setbacks, as well as our landscape buffer, as it is along a corridor overlay district which has enhanced landscaping standards. And these properties are going to experience a loss of parking and some site layout issues. Also, there is going to be some loss in signage and then limited redevelopment space. And so I want to quickly go over this example. So this is Broadway right here, and this is Walnut. And we have the Jack's Burgers, and then over here is Starbucks. And so this example is indicating that TxDOT is acquiring 10 feet of right-of-way. And so the current property line is in that dark blue color. The acquisition is in that lighter blue color, and the TxDOT revised property line is in red. And so this property is losing their landscaping that's in the front of Broadway, as well as some headlight screening, as well as their sign, and 3 feet of parking. Again, this is an example, but what does the city want to see out of these properties? Today, they can remain as is for the time being. However, when there's 3 feet of parking taken, we no longer have a row of compliant parking. We have a row of 15-foot long stalls, which a Kia Soul, for example, may be able to fit comfortably in, but a Ford F-250, a Ford F-150 may encroach into the fire lane and cause life safety issues. And so when is an owner supposed to come into the city, and what are we going to expect of them to alleviate some of these life safety concerns? And so we've been working with the consultants called Design Workshop, and this table is a little difficult to read, and so I've placed the purple squares in the highlight to really block off each section that they are talking about. And so I'm going to go square by square, where we have the element and then we have the expansion. So here's the element. We have setbacks, parking, utility, and sidewalks, and then impact and action. And so the first column is expansion impacting less than 10% of the property. So this is the lesser impact, meaning a minor encroachment regarding setbacks, maybe 5 to 10 feet. And so the action could be an administrative adjustment, restoring landscaping with the remaining area. However, if the expansion impacts 10 to 25% and the setback is encroached, alternative compliance is allowed with enhanced frontage treatments. However, no forced compliance if physically infeasible. And on that same note, the highest acquisition impacting 25% or more of the property, meaning the setback is completely lost. The action is designate as corridor overlay district, TxDOT nonconformity. Alternative compliance is permitted, however, no forced compliance if physically infeasible. Also discussing parking. Less than 10%, minor stall loss and restriping is required. An administrative adjustment is permitted. 10 to 25%, the parking encroaches into the required setback. An alternative compliance or shared parking arrangement can be conducted. However, no forced compliance where placement is impossible. Looking at expansion 25 plus, parking area is significantly impacted and cannot be restored. The action, recognize nonconformity, no forced compliance where expansion removes functional area. Utilities, impact, minor exposure of above ground utility. And before I go any further, the above ground utility section essentially is discussing pad mounted transformers, utility meters, and utility pedestals, not necessarily above ground utility lines that we have seen along Broadway. So I wanted to just make that clear for everyone. So again, utility impact, less than 10%. This is a minor exposure to the above ground utility. The action is that the property owner would need to add vegetative screening. 10 to 25%, utility becomes visible from the corridor, architectural or vegetative screening required, no forced compliance where placement is impossible, and then 25% or higher, the impact is utility relocation is required. And the action, allow relocation under alternative compliance, no forced compliance where placement is impossible. And then finally, sidewalks, less than 10%, impact is slight frontage loss, curved alignment is feasible, adjust the sidewalk alignment is going to be that action. 10 to 25%, required curved alignment is infeasible, and action is straight or modified curved alignment allowed, no forced compliance where placement is impossible. And then finally, 25% plus, the impact, standard sidewalk cannot be provided. The action, provide interior pedestrian zone as alternative compliance, no forced compliance where placement is impossible. As I said at the beginning of this slide, there's a lot of words. This is hard to read, it's hard to understand, and so here is a revised table that essentially is the same text and the same message, but in a little bit of a cleaner format, a little less words. And so we can work with Design Workshop to make this a little bit more understandable for not only staff and applicant and just general reader, but overall just making the intent clear on what redevelopment looks like along Broadway. And so initial recommendations, potentially adding a UDC section with the standards to bring Broadway properties more into compliance once this project gets going. Maybe even establishing a specific criteria, creating flexibility, again, that if X then Y, then Z scenarios, and then maybe even adding in some staff approval in some instances. And so what does an overlay district look like, minor versus major nonconformities, when to require incremental compliance, and what level of adjustment is the City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission comfortable with at the staff level, and maybe some properties going to the Zoning Board of Adjustments. As stated in the first section, we did have a stakeholder feedback meeting on June 1st, and they asked some questions. How many properties are being impacted in each of the 3 categories that were presented? And then consider what is adjacent to the site that is redeveloping, residential versus commercial, essentially meaning maybe the triggers are lesser if they're adjacent to commercial on all 4 sides, and maybe the trigger is higher if there is residential. And then finally, the stakeholder group doesn't exactly want to overwhelm the Zoning Board of Adjustment with the same case multiple times. And so what does that look like? Is that more staff administrative approvals, or is there a table or a threshold that we can avoid going to the Zoning Board of Adjustment? And so I will conclude with some questions similar to the first section. What is the primary purpose of the Broadway triggers table, and how does it serve in the City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission's opinion? Does implementing a Broadway trigger table balance redevelopment incentives with community expectations? And are there certain triggers that could be too lenient or too aggressive and discourage reinvestment and quality redevelopment? Could having both a Broadway triggers table and a general triggers table create confusion? And what outcome would the City Council and the Planning and Zoning Commission like to see in 10 years because of the triggers table? And I'll pass it back to you, Mayor. Thank you.
Great questions. And because they're so great, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Eisenberg to lead us off.
Lots of information. Thank you very much. Just some, I guess one kind of overall, and it's more theoretical. I guess what would it look like if a particular property owner had more than one, if not multiple or all? And therefore, how do we at this point in time pick which one we want to satisfy? Or meaning the taking, I see your look. The taking affected the sidewalk, it affected their parking, it affected everything on the list, and which one would we hold priority as to deem it okay or non-conforming, but which one, if any, would we then say, no, you need to come back because we've paid for your taking and we've paid the cost to cure and we've given you some, and so which one then do we choose for them, or do we prioritize as we want to bring back into conformity, if that makes sense? Because it could be all. We could take one back row in the instance of the crunch. We could take a back row of parking. We could have taken their sidewalk. We could have taken their planting, and we could have produced a cost to cure to bring it back to some normality. But then we've got this precedent, or no, we've got this non-conformity issue. Do we want to, or are we going to then hold them to some prioritization of what we would want them to bring back? Is it the sidewalk? Is it the plantings? With that money that they were given in a cost to cure.
Hey, Commissioner Henricks here. I'm trying to find out what was the status of the detention, because TxDOT detention requirements are extremely high. I don't see a lot of these businesses able to meet that. Underground detention is extremely expensive. What was the status? Because I thought that was something that was going to be negotiated, that they were going to provide either A, we're not going to require them to meet detention, or TxDOT was going to provide it. Does engineering know what the status was of that? And then I guess my other question is TxDOT not relocating the utilities? Or is that on the owner? I just didn't understand that. I was assuming TxDOT would be relocating some of that. It's different.
Okay, thank you.
Remember the state name. I don't know who it is.
Okay, yeah, this is City Engineer, City of Pearland. Thank you. So regarding impervious cover along Broadway Street, when we approve construction plan along Broadway Street, we will have to get approval from TxDOT. So we cannot say that you don't need it or you need it. No matter what, they have to get approval from TxDOT. And for Broadway itself, they have done their drainage study and they're going to provide detention for their project. So when they do their project, they consider outside of the right of way to whatever is coming there, it will continue to come there, and they will accommodate their design to take care of the flow coming offsite.
Okay, so the current businesses now on 518, they size their storm sewer to take the flow for that entire development.
Yes, that is correct.
So if somebody comes in with a permit and they're going to make changes, the city's not going to ask them to provide detention.
I don't follow the question. If the site is unimproved, undeveloped,
Well, developed site, sorry.
Yeah, if it is a developed site, we will defer it to TxDOT. We will review based on our plans, and we will review what we can approve based on our engineering design criteria manual. But ultimately, we will ask TxDOT to approve. And there's a two-way thing. Sometimes TxDOT asks us to send them no objection letter from the city side too. So if there's no way that the development can happen, in some instances we have issued no objection letter to TxDOT on the behalf of the property owners too. Again, we cannot go against our ordinance. There are certain guidelines, and as a floodplain administrator, we have to follow our guidelines too.
Okay, and what about the utilities?
Right now, we have our own project to relocate all water line and sanitary sewer outside of TxDOT right-of-way or within the TxDOT right-of-way. So utility within the right-of-way will be taken care as a separate project.
So that's not something, because I saw on the table the utility relocation required. When would that be? When would that happen to the business owner? When would they have to redo the utilities?
Katya, can you explain if that utility is a public utility or the private utility belongs to the private business owners?
So my understanding of the utility section is when a transformer pad is exposed or needs to be relocated. And so we're not talking about above ground utilities, but it also does have to do with when a property owner comes in for a permit, or are we going to be reactive and ask them to come in and install additional vegetative screening or no force compliance if there's an impossible placement. And so that's kind of the question, is when should these triggers come to fruition? Is when one of them comes in for a permit for expansion, or do we need to be reactive, and because this property owner received payment from TxDOT and the next owner may not receive any money, but they may want to come in for an expansion plan, then we would have these triggers required. And so the question of when and the timing is really important on this scenario. But as far as utility relocation required, it does state allow relocation under alternative compliance. However, no force compliance where placement is impossible. A question that we want to ask the group is, what does that mean as far as where placement is impossible? Is the city making that determination? Is the property owner making that determination? Who's claiming that I have no possible relocation efforts?
I'm not clear about that, because when we relocate our water line and sanitary lines, that will be a part of project to reconnect service line to existing business owners. So it will be reconnected and the service will be provided to existing business owners. And if you're talking about the above grounds, then that is not the city's infrastructure. We don't touch them.
So just to jump in real quick, I think and Raj had messaged me while we were in this meeting, and Raj, you can confirm why.
Yeah, I think I can explain. Is it sidewalk?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and sidewalk, when TxDOT widens Broadway Street, they are going to install 10-foot sidewalk on one side and 6-foot sidewalk on the other side. So the sidewalk issue should not be there.
Okay, so can you go back to the picture? Thank you so much. In this particular case, the fire lane, they wouldn't be able to back up the parking. So I think that shouldn't be a ZBA issue. I think that should be at staff level. Staff can say, maybe you could fit in parallel parking in certain areas and improve the landscaping or put back in landscaping. I'm not sure what TxDOT's on the hook for. If they have to remove it, are they going to replace the landscaping in the right of way? I'm not sure what all occurred with those negotiations, or they're getting paid for it. But I think that should not be a ZBA issue on the parking. That needs to be staff level, because staff can the appropriate staff member can look at this and say, yeah, you're not going to be able to move the parking back. So that's my only last comment.
I think that's a great comment, and if I can follow up with a question, would you like to see the property owner come in proactively and restripe these parking stalls even though they did not have any plans to expand parking, paving, building? Or do we wait until the next owner comes to own this property and wants to expand?
Well, when they put in the new roadway, I think it's one of those where, yeah, I guess that's a good question is currently what do? Can they put in parallel parking? Like, I think the city could go and look at these properties and say, this is the options you have. That's it. We don't need to make this super complicated and going through a ZBA board. I don't think that's the right board for all of this. It needs to be done at the city level. And let the owners know, hey, this is what we identified, what you can do with this. And what we understand now is not going to work ever. So I don't really know, like, what's the best? Wait till they get a new leasee at that point? That just seems like that. I think maybe that's something council has to decide. How do you want to regulate that?
Commissioner Knight, I have a question about the table, and excuse me, I keep looking at that picture and wondering how we came up with, for this table, expansion impacting less than 10% of the property, 10 to 25 and more than 25% of the property. I don't think it really matters. It has zero, there's just one answer here because everybody's being impacted. That example you gave, they're going to lose half their parking. And those businesses are going to suffer. And then you want to ask the landowner when he comes back in later for something else to fix the problem some way. I mean, it's going to be really difficult. And I think it's way too complicated because, again, it's not whether it's 10% or 35% of the property, it's gone. And that's a nice building. I remember when it was built. I mean, it's 20 years old probably, but it's, that's a nice shopping center. Doesn't have a lot of parking now, and now it's going to be hurt. And the only option they're going to have is to either bust up the curbs on both sides and put diagonal parking in there and make it one way through the parking lot to be able to do that, to get parking on both sides and get whatever the city's requirement is for the fire lanes, the width required for the fire lanes. So in this case, I don't know how you're going to go with any of this stuff, go back to the business owners reasonably and ask them to do something. But I definitely, just looking at this, I kept trying to figure out, why are we saying 10%, up to 25 or greater than 25? It's immaterial.
So, and just to, if I may, Commissioner Knight, so when it came to the percentages, the goal was to try and find an ability to right-size the solution to the taking, if you will. And so the goal is absolutely to not overload ZBA, and as much as we can get done at the staff level, we want to do that. But there's certainly going to be situations to where they probably would be inappropriate for staff to approve it just because of the significance of the impact. And we want those decisions to be made by the appropriate boards. So that's kind of one of the reasons we ended up with a 10 in these percentage categories. Certainly agree with the difficulty of classifying it. One item I did want to share, just because the TxDOT trigger table and the regular trigger table, those are similar in terminology, but one difference here is, this group was compensated in some way for whatever it is they lost, part of which came from the city of Pearland's taxpayer dollars as well. And so when it comes to them being asked to get somewhat compliant, I think it is a little more favorable as far as it being realistic and understanding. I mean, these people were paid for the land they lost, and what we asked for them to put back, it needs to be balanced, and it has to be physically doable. But there is just, some differences there related to that. And then one item, just when it came up to the timing of when the improvement would be made, I'm not sure, and we'll just want to do some more research on this, but I think these improvements would have to be made whenever the business owner comes in for some sort of permit. I'm not sure, we'd have to just look into what type of proactive items we could do.
Okay, so my understanding of what you're saying, then, this is not what they have to do as soon as the expansion is completed. Do they have any requirements? Because, you keep saying they were compensated for it, but they lost something for it. They didn't gain anything. And they're going to be hurt in the future, especially in that picture, because they're going to have much less traffic flow. Because I'll be honest, if I drive through and all the parking spots are full, I go to the next one. So, I mean, that's my comments on this thing.
So yes, I completely agree about the physical lost space, but there was also just a monetary exchange that does occur, and that's where the balance has got to be found, and the acknowledgement of, no, physically we lost this space, but monetarily they were reimbursed, and so there is just a balance of trying to find what compliant looks like, and that's what we're here to talk about today.
Just to interject really quickly, and I want to make sure everyone is has their input so that we can move forward and you have all the information you need to do so. Just as a time check for council members, because I know we do have some concerns. I want to make sure that we are aware of time. There's some additional items that I know we want to get to. So with that in mind, commissioners, are there any other concerns or questions before we move it to council?
I'm just curious of have we looked at a, kind of case by case property or maybe a certain area and seen how many of these, because I see a lot of no force compliance. Do we know what that percentage is along the corridor? Have we kind of looked at, certain areas or zones to see, and is there a way to get in front of that? Like, Jennifer was mentioning earlier about looking at certain things from a staff level that we can recommend.
Sorry. So right now we're at about 100 properties that we're evaluating. And the individual, and to your point, the evaluating them individually is appropriate, but evaluating individually means staff takes it to ZBA. And so whenever we're trying to apply more broad rules to keep it at the staff level and make it easier on the customer, we've got to categorize it some way. But about 100 properties currently.
Just to follow up, ZBA, you're utilizing them. Is there anything the P&Z can do to help evaluate prior to have a lot of commercial experience, I guess I'm saying?
No, not with these are property restrictions that would allow them not to meet an existing code. So it's variances.
And in the last little thing, we spoke of triggers. I think it was called, when they come in for a permit to do something, does that include when a multi-use building like the one that was displayed, if they come in and change out, if Jack's turns into Lenny's again, or it was Lenny's before, let's say they want to now be Jack's, that's a permit they're going to need for that interior build out. Would that trigger then the entire facility having to change all their parking, et cetera, et cetera?
So I think great question. First of all, appreciate that, Member Fuertes, Commissioner Fuertes. No, I would, and that may be a column we need to add to the text dot or the this trigger table is change of occupant. That may be something we need to look at.
Okay, we're done. Back to you.
Appreciate it. And now, Councilmember Koza, any questions?
Thank you, Mayor. One, I don't know what y'all's thoughts are on, allowing staff and in these type situations. I try and keep ZBA out of it altogether because, like I said earlier, the only recourse you have is ZBA goes against it, filing a lawsuit against the city, and that's not a cheap process. You have 10 days from when your ZBA hearing is to do that. So if staff's going to handle it, I'm fine, but there should be an appeals process coming back to council so that that if something doesn't jive or add up, there is a way to get some resolve. From that, on Highway 35, I don't know what year it was when it was widened. We had an instance where through lack of concentration on and inventory on fire hydrants, one disappeared. And landowner had an inspection they wanted to add to the building, and they said, hey, we got a problem. You don't have fire access to be able to put out a fire. And from that, the landowner said, there's a fire hydrant right out there. And when the fire marshal walked out, he said, no, there's not. This went round and round, and basically when it came down, it was really shocking that the city was trying to make the landowner pay for a fire hydrant that was there since 1965 or so, 68, somewhere right in there. So we really need to take an inventory of every fire hydrant that's out there. We need to make sure that every one of them gets put back, because it was kind of comical to watch the council discuss about how an 8-inch line was there, and now all of a sudden the code said it needed to be a 10-inch. And then they wanted to turn around and say, well, that landowner needs to pay for it. And I was kind of like, well, welcome to City of Pearland and our UDC. That's kind of how it rolls and how it works. So please make sure that we don't have that happen on this one. I know Mayor Cole's sitting here in the audience, and when we've had discussions on this stuff before, he had always posed where we have a landowner that has debt on the property, fire happens, hurricane, whatever type of disaster happens, all of a sudden it puts them in a position to have to rebuild their facility, and now we have nonconformities. So we all of a sudden blow up a massive impact, because here you have a bank saying, hey, you've got to rebuild your asset, and we have all these nonconformities that have been created because a road got widened, wouldn't be there had the road not been widened. So how do we help a landowner? How do we help somebody like that with not being penalized with all of a sudden this onerous amount of nonconformities that were of no fault of their own other than where they're placed? Business kind of like to be on busy streets, not in back roads. So that's something that we should look at, as far as this instance that you have right here. If you wanted to have parallel parking, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, it helps. But you're not going to get anywhere close to the parking, and you're going to have an issue with when people want to go eat there or attend any of the businesses in that area, because I know at lunchtime that parking lot's full as it is right now. So it's going to create some problems. I don't think we should be onerous on the landowner or the building owner, but if they come in to add on to their business at the 15% or more like we have now, okay, fine, then we've got to kind of work around, because if they don't have land, how do you create it? It's kind of tough. So some of those type questions, when the hardship was created because of something that was there that worked, and now we created something that doesn't, we need to be able to just kind of say, hey, it is what it is. And also be cognizant that if somebody does have debt on the property, that hardship even gets harder, because you got a bank that wants to be compliant with the asset they have financed, and a landowner that's wanting to get back into business. And here we are saying, oh, but you've got to do tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of upgrades. So that's my thoughts.
Councilman
Nichols. This whole aspect of widening Broadway here, I don't know, are we getting the cart before the horse? Because I've been in meetings in this dais where we had transportation associations come in, and we're talking about making Broadway a one-way, making Walnut one way the other way. We've talked about making Walnut, changing it to FM 518, and with our Old Town revitalization, want to have more walking. With that, are we getting the cart before the horse to even be looking at widening Broadway between Walnut, and McLean. So if we're going to widen it, we know there's innate problems, and this is not something we're going to be able to fix in an hour meeting. It's going to be something that we're going to have to really look at resources, bring transportation authorities in, and have them come in, developers that deal with parking, and what can be done, what can't be done. And there's going to have to be a give and take between the city, the state, and the business. So my thing is, do we have the cart before the horse if we really don't know if we're going to go one way Broadway, the other way Walnut, if we're going to change Walnut to 518? There's all other possibilities there. So, gotcha.
Yeah.
Vance, thank you much. You brought some key issues that we have to knock around and really come up with some kind of conclusion, but till we really know what's going to happen there, I think it's a moot point.
Then, if I may, real quick, Member Eccles, so the Broadway expansion right now, and just as far as the Walnut portion of your comment, that's specific to the Old Town part of the Walnut and Broadway as it stands right now. So right now, the TxDOT portion would go from 288 to McLean. The section we're talking about right now is from Colon to McLean and stop ahead of Broadway or ahead of Old Town. So that portion through there isn't part of what TxDOT's discussing.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. So I would like to know how many properties are impacted, and I'd like to see an example of this from Cullen to McLean and how those property lines are going to change. Because it would be, believe that would be a variance for each property line, correct, on 518? So I think having something like that presented to us would be more helpful. Thank you.
Good point. Yep. Councilmember Barham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Vance, you mentioned that these property owners, though everybody impacted had an opportunity to work with TxDOT to get compensated for what was taken from them. And that was each situation's individual deal they worked out with TxDOT. Do you know if any of that compensation involved the cost they're going to have to incur to come into compliance with our UDC, or was it just for the property that they lost?
Yes, sir. So the conversation should have included coming back with a compliant product where possible.
Okay.
You said should?
So I guess the challenge there is if we can't figure out what compliance looks like, how did they figure out what they needed to be compensated for? So I guess the question would be, because I'm unfamiliar with negotiating a taking with TxDOT. So would any of these property owners have a second bite at the apple with TxDOT, or are they done? If we come back and we put some standards in place, can they go back to TxDOT and say, city did this, now you paid me 50, but it's going to cost me 100. What does that look like?
So there's ongoing conversations. Give me just 1 second here. So there's been ongoing conversations, part of which the city has participated in when we're meeting with TxDOT and sitting down to say, hey, we are going to require these people to do X, Y, Z. You need to pay them for such. Where they are in their negotiations, I would want to double check just to know where certain properties are, what percentages are buttoned up or which aren't.
Okay. I definitely want to be compassionate to the hardship that it's going to put on some of these properties, especially ones that may lose half of their parking. They're not going to have any other option other than hopefully buy out somebody next door and tear their building down or something. I don't know. So I want to be compassionate about that, but I also want to be aware that if you've got to replace the landscaping, you were paid to replace the landscaping, then is it onerous to them to do what they were already compensated to do? So it's kind of an enigma in there to figure that out. And I'm not sure how we go about it, but I do want to be considerate about the business owners. It goes back to our previous conversation with the UDC. We want to be a development-friendly, business-friendly community. And for years, we've talked about being able to live and work in Pearland. We want to make sure businesses can continue to operate. We don't want to put a bunch of restrictions on them that would keep them from doing that. A different question that I had, and Member Koza touched on it a little bit. We talked about not overwhelming ZBA. We talked about taking things. given the uniqueness of this situation, can we bypass ZPA altogether and take these nonconformity situations and bring it to council? If staff can't work it out with them, bring it to council and let us work it out with them, because I'd hate to start sending people into court proceedings constantly because they don't have any other choice, just because we've got this crazy circumstance that'll probably never happen again.
I think staff can do some research on what the options are, but I mean, we would just need to do some review of what our language, the charter language and other items say related to that.
I don't know. I mean, I know there's 7 of us, so don't take direction from one of us sitting here, but how the rest of council feels about that.
I would support it.
Overly interested in putting more work on council, but I think that that's way more user friendly for the citizens to be able to come to us and talk through it rather than have to go into a litigated situation. If that's something that we can do. Member Cozy, sorry, I talked over you. What'd you say?
I said I would support it.
Oh, okay. Well, I figured you might. So that was just another thought that I had. Yeah, the rest of it, we've talked about this quite a bit for the last year because we know this is coming, and I hope staff at least gets the sense from council that we want to be as flexible as we can to help these businesses continue to operate and function in our community. So however we can adjust this to make that happen, that's I would be in favor of.
Councilman McCade.
Thank you. On the, my iPad is not working at all. On, I think it was slide 11. Let me see. No, back to right there. When did we say we should not grandfather the corridor?
I would say overall that's been the theme, just as far as it needs to be appropriate, balanced improvements.
You mean we should not grandfather businesses that are already there, or grandfather?
Oh, just
what
that.
What does this mean exactly?
No. So specifically, just shouldn't be grandfathered of, okay, TxDOT, whatever happened to your property happened, you don't have to do anything. I think there's been consensus the entire time that when you do come in for a permit, an appropriate balanced improvement would be needed to the site.
Okay. And on the next slide, one more, sorry. It was the stakeholder, there was a stakeholder meeting on June 1st. Did I miss a notification about that?
No, so for the UDC update, Planning and Zoning and Council are the steering committee, and then we have a separate stakeholder group that's made up of recommendations that came from y'all.
Who are the stakeholders? That's the UDC again?
Yeah, I can share the list.
Okay. And the example that was shown for a Broadway expansion with Jackson, the parking lot, that's not being expanded, to be clear.
That's correct. At this time, no. This was just an example. It was a bird's eye view photo that was high quality, that we thought was a good example to showcase to the group the idea that there are about 100 properties that are not being fully acquired. That was kind of our previous conversation, but 100 properties that have like a 10 to 20 to 30 foot acquisition, and what the city wants to do moving forward with incrementally bringing some of these properties into compliance, or what compliance looks like. And so I apologize if I didn't make that clear enough, that this is just a made-up example along Broadway Street.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure. But this section's, you said it's stopping at Cullen.
It will eventually go through all the way to our boundary to the Friendswood, but right now we're talking about basically that the sections 1 and 2. I think it's
Why?
What do you mean why?
Why will it eventually go all the way?
Just because of traffic demand and the needs of the number of people in town driving to Broadway.
But when I was running for council, and Joseph can attest to this, people would say, we don't want this. We don't want this. We don't want this. The expansion. So if if the residents don't want it, well, Friendswood said they didn't want it, and they didn't do it. They wanted to keep the way it looked through there. So if we want to keep it looking a certain way, why do we have to do this?
When you say looking a certain way, could you clarify? I'm not sure what you're asking.
Keep Pearland looking like it does instead of expanding things and taking over businesses that have been here for a long time.
Well, I'd leave it to staff, but I just want to just say again, like there's been expansion and population demand increase in traffic flow. So I think that's what triggered this expansion to TxDOT. But I mean, I'd leave it to staff to elaborate, give more specifics.
Yes, sir, I would agree. Just as far as it's a TxDOT facility, and based off of the traffic demands and the population of our area, I mean, they run their analysis and do their TIAs just like we do, and it's determined that the road needs to be widened.
So if Friendswood can tell them no, they don't want that part, they don't want it through their city, we can't do that? If the residents don't want it, and council, if we say we don't want it, they're just going to do it anyway?
I would want to follow up on that, just as far as Friendswood saying no. But I mean, this is a project that's underway. Property's being reimbursed. Widening is already, I mean, right away.
That's what a council member in Friendswood told me. So I'm just, maybe it's not true, but that's.
I could follow up on that portion or just do some look into it. But I mean, this is a project that's underway. Negotiations are happening. Property acquisitions are happening. Work in the right of way to relocate utilities is already occurring.
That we're paying for.
That the city
And
does make a portion
property
of it.
acquisition that the taxpayers are paying for.
A portion,
Taxpayers that don't want it.
a portion of the reimbursements that the properties receive is from the city of Pearland.
I just wanted to make it clear. I want a clarification. Thank you.
Councilman Fernandez.
Thank you, Mayor. Vance, just one question. On the chart, page 13, where you put 10% or less than 10%, 10 to 25, and 25 and more. Have we thought about a timeline to like for the residents or the businesses for a completion date? Something like, okay, if they fall under less than 10%, they have this amount of time to complete it versus somebody that obviously is affected, you know, more than 25%. Have we thought about putting, you know, hey, a reasonable timeline, because obviously it's already going to be a shakeup to these businesses. And so I would like to see, if there's not something already in place, I'd like to see something to be considerate to what's happening on 518, perhaps maybe a timeline.
So I think I understand the question. Just point me in a better direction if I get it wrong. So whenever it comes to these improvements, these will be when the business owners come to us with an expansion. Like, we're not going to proactively go say, hey, TxDOT hit you, you got to do X now. And so with that, now there will be some that have to come in because of the significance of the change made. Certain people may have to come in to reconfigure, and those would have to be done then. But the rest, where it is TxDOT just cut your landscaping in half, we may never hear from them for years.
Okay, so like setbacks, the new setbacks after the expansion or anything like that, they can do that however long it takes. The pressure is not going to be from the city to them to get it done.
No, on items that aren't impacting like the operations of the business to where they need to do something, or a life safety item. Like I said, if they cut a landscaping island in half long ways, it may sit like that for a number of years before they come in to do an expansion or whatever it may be. And at that time, staff would walk them through the trigger table of, hey, these are your options.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Patel, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm new to this. I know Mayor Cole is here, and he's probably the expert on this. But from my point of view, we have a property that's being impacted. And I'll tell you, talking to some of the other property owners on 518, they're compensated pretty fairly. Now, for example, you're talking about utilities. We have a water vault, major water vault that is in the way, and they're compensating us. They gave us a proposal of what they thought the cost was, and they told us to go get our proposal. We did, and they agreed with our numbers, and it was our job to get it moved before they start construction. You're talking about landscaping. They also gave us money to replace the landscaping. Now the problem's going to be, I will tell you, most businesses may take the money and not do anything, like Vince said. But what's going to happen in about 5-6 years when they come to expand and you're going to go tell them, put the landscaping back in there, they're going to say they don't have the money because the costs have gone up. So at what point do you say you were compensated 5 years ago at a fair price, but you chose not to do it, and now you're going to argue, oh, it's too much, I can't afford it. So what's fair? You got paid for it. Now, I understand, and I think you used a bad example on the picture. People got stuck on that picture. I think the best picture you could use is probably the chamber, because the chamber is losing significant parking spot in the front. And believe it or not, the chamber got paid $800,000. That building originally was $1.2 million. Fair compensation, I think, just for the parking spot. Now, if you could pull it up by any chance in Google, if you could. The reason I tell you that is because they got paid for the fact, and according to Jim Johnson, you can talk to him, is because they were going to lose, I forgot, 17 parking spots. But for their purpose, yeah, the front or whatever it is, not even 17, just, yeah. So for their purpose, he said they still had enough parking spots to work in that building. Now, Killen's Steakhouse down the road, I don't think they're losing parking spots, because I know we're not losing any parking spots. But I think the question here today by city is, at what point do you want them to make the businesses conform for what they've been compensated? It's a very simple question. And if we say we're not worried about landscaping, and if you're okay with it, go down by 288 and 518 and you see all the trees gone. And I think it looks horrible. I think it looks horrible. Now, they've been paid, and I wouldn't replace it now, but when the construction is done, I think the city should force them to put it in. I think it's again, we want our city to look certain ways. We're not forcing them where it's costing them out of their pocket. They have been compensated for it. So it's not money. You know, earlier we were talking about we don't want the businesses to take on undue cost. In this case, it's not an undue cost. They were fairly compensated. And I think it's fair for them not to hold that money and go spend it else. And then 5 years from now, we're going through and saying our city doesn't look right. Hey, they're even replacing, my understanding is TxDOT is going to replace all the sidewalks, even in places that are not sidewalks. So what do you want it to look like? And I think that's the question. And for me, look, again, we have a business. We have chosen, TxDOT is going to pay us. They're going to cut the trees down. And they said, hey, best time to do it is after the construction is done. Don't replace anything until then. Is the cost going to be fair? That's the argument. And that's the argument you had to make with TxDOT to say, hey, it's going to take you 7 years. What you're compensating me today is not going to be worth it. But that's the negotiation you have to do. But I think the question is, if I'm not mistaken, is what do you want to conform? At what point do you want them to conform to this?
Yeah, I think I would certainly appreciate that perspective, and we can look into the force compliant component of the timing. I'm truly not sure about our option to do that, but no, I think the win will have to be tied to when they come in for an expansion. But glad to look into, because we will get a list of everyone who got a compensation of some sort, and can we work that list? Is that a legal option?
I think this is the conversation has been robust. I hope we've given you enough information to go back and make some considerations for all these triggers. That being said, I don't think there's any more discussion on this item. I'd like to move to the next item, new business. which is a request by Kevin Stuckey, Barkley Developers, applicant on behalf of Charles Viktorin, owner, for a planned development workshop as required by the UDC regarding proposed development consisting of 190 townhome units on approximately 20.006 acres of land. Staff, is there some information you can provide for us?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. All right, so this is the very first step in the requirement prior to a planned development zoning change request to be submitted. And so this is a proposed build-to-rent townhome development consisting of 190 units with a mix of 3 and 4 bedrooms with 2-car garages, along with a pool, a playground, surface parking, and amenitized detention. And the base zoning proposal is TH, Townhouse Residential. Let's look at the property here. We have a picture of the property on the right side of the screen. Current zoning is general business, and surrounding the property is also general business to the north, extraterritorial jurisdiction, ETJ, single family residential to the south. To the east is suburban residential 12, and to the west is also the ETJ. Our future land use map has this area designated as compact residential as well as parks and open space. And a summary of the request. Again, the base zoning is townhouse residential, 190 units, mix of 3 and 4 bedrooms, gross density of 9.5 units per acre, 477 total parking spaces with 380 garage spaces and 97 surface spaces. Proposed amenities again include a pool, park, and common open space. Here is the site plan that the applicant has provided. On the right side of the screen is their breakdown of their unit counts. We have 56 20-foot wide 4-bed, 2.5 bath units. We have 56 20-foot end units with 3 beds, 2.5 bath. And then we have 78 24-foot wide lots with 3 beds and 2.5 baths. History of this site is it was annexed in 1997, currently not platted, and this request may sound familiar to some of y'all, and that is because in 2024, a joint workshop was held to discuss a build-to-rent community with 153 dwelling units. However, the applicant did not come forward with a formal application once the workshop had concluded. So public notices are not required for workshops. However, we still like to show this slide, and as of today, we have not received any written comments or phone calls on the request. Here are the proposed stipulations and deviations that the applicant is tentatively proposing. Happy to dive into these deeper later, but just want to have the screen up. And that concludes staff report. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, and I believe there's someone here for comments. Mayor Pro Tem, I can hand it over to you to facilitate.
Yes, Mayor, we do have a citizen comment, Charles Viktorin. State your name. Thank you.
My name is Charles Viktorin. I live at 1109 Basalt Court in Temple, Texas, 76502. Mayor, council, commissioners, and staff. My name is Charles Viktorin, and I want to express my strong support for the proposed rezone. I respectfully urge you to rezone this property to the proposed planned development, as it represents one of the most natural and appropriate housing sites in Pearland. Not long ago, I had the privilege of serving as both a Pearland City Councilman and as Chair of Planning and Zoning. From that perspective, I can confidently say that this rezone possesses several qualities that would have made it easy for me to support during my time in office. Today, I ask that you give it the same consideration. One of the strongest attributes of this site is its 3 natural built-in buffers. To the west, you have Smith Road, which serves as a buffer. To the east, you have Ower Lane, and to the south, a 35-foot easement, which creates an additional layer of protection. Together, these elements ensure a thoughtful and compatible transition transition for the surrounding neighborhoods. As you know, planned unit developments often serve as an effective buffer between GB and residential parcels. This planned unit development will fulfill that purpose by creating a logical transition between the GB zoning along 518 and the residential zoning adjacent to the property. Finally, this location is uniquely suited for this planned development because of its walkable proximity to almost 20 restaurants, multiple shops, and other everyday necessities. Residents will enjoy both convenience and quality of life, while nearby businesses and restaurants will benefit from increased patronage. In this way, the development offers a true win-win for future residents, for local businesses, and for the city of Pearland as a whole. Thanks for your consideration. I respectfully urge you to work with the developer and approve this rezone request. I would also like to say that I've had multiple offers, and I really liked this developer's plan. The other offers I would classify as more of traditional multifamily, where I like their product much better. It's a less dense product. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your comments.
Yeah. Any other comments? No?
We just have the developers that are here to present, Mayor.
Okay. Would someone please step to the podium for their presentation? Is it Grace Malvo? Oh, sure. Okay.
Hello, my name is Grace Malvo. I work for EHRA Engineering, and we were tasked with reviewing the Pearland Comprehensive Plan and the Unified Development Code to see what, if any, deviations would be needed to bring a proposed compact residential development before you guys. So we did do that, and I'm just going to briefly go over the deviations that we are initially requesting with this draft so we can get your input and thoughts and prepare a strong application to present to you guys at a later date. I won't go over the land use table again since you guys just heard about that, but it is going to consist of open space, some dedication for the right-of-way to both Ower Lane and Smith Road. We have some acreage assigned to residential, and we do have that pipeline easement to the south. From Chapter 2, zoning regulations for the townhouse residential district, which is the base that we did our review on, we are asking for an exception to the requirement for a minimum of a 40-acre lot. Our acreage is just over 20 acres, so that would be our first deviation request. In addition to that, we are requesting a reduction in the walking distance from a residential unit to the common open space. I'm sorry, an increase from 300 feet to 600 feet. So there is going to be a little bit of a longer walk for the residents, but that is because we have a central focal point and we have a larger open space that more of our residents will be able to use at the same time. And due to the nature of our development and the compact aspect we're trying to achieve, we are requesting that the detention be considered as part of our common open space. From the Chapter 3 subdivision regulations, we're asking for two deviations. The first one is to reduce the minimum lot width from 25 feet to 24 feet, and this is based on the design concept that the developer has for the site. We're also requesting a reduction in the width of the overall length, minimum length of the street, and that's going to be from 600 feet to 500 feet. Again, we have a small compact area of 20 acres, so that's reflective of the smaller size. We need a smaller block length. From the Chapter 4 site development standards, we are requesting no landscape reserves. We do have some natural buffers on both the east and west side by Ower Lane and Smith Lane, so that's going to provide some protection from future development and existing development on both sides. To the north, the anticipated use that will be coming will be of a commercial or retail development type, and when that development comes, they will be required to have a substantial buffer. So we don't feel that the additional buffer on our side would be of any extensive additional benefit to the residents. And then along the south border, there are some residents that are already built and in place. And we do have a 35-foot pipeline easement that's going to provide a natural protection from that already existing development and the future development we are proposing. And right next to it, there is some anticipated development, which again is going to be a residential use. So we will be buffering a residential and a residential use, which are generally compatible, which will require a minimal landscape reserve since they're such a similar use. And since the higher density product, which is what we are proposing, will be already built in place, there should be no negative impact on future residential that's coming to the south because they'll be aware of the townhomes. So it won't be like, oh, a surprise came there. The next slide I have here are some additional deviations that we did find out of the Chapter 2 zoning regulations townhome district. But I will note that the City of Pearland is going through a update on their UDC, and all of these items are already slated for review and consideration. And if Pearland does decide to approve the update that they have out for the public comment now, all of these deviations would be resolved automatically. Two of them are related to setbacks, our front yard setback and our side setback. One of them is related to the total acreage of the lot, which will be matching exactly what's proposed in the MD1 medium density category that's been proposed to Pearland. And the last one has to do with the common open space. Right now, the current ordinance requires at 800 square feet of open space per dwelling unit. We're proposing 825, but the UDC update is going to require 10% of the gross acreage site, which we would exceed. So I do have the developer here, and he will speak more on the product, but if you guys have questions on the deviations we're requesting, I'm happy to answer them for you.
If you can please give us your name. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Kevin Stuckey with Barkley Development. My address is 3228 Marinil in Houston, Texas, 77025. On this site, do I get that back up? There we go. I wanted to point out a couple of things on this site. As Grace has mentioned, we're between our road and Smith Road, or County Road 666. We're 700 feet south of Broadway, approximately, it varies some. The Silver Lake to our west and part of our south boundary is in Brazoria County. It's not in the city. We've talked with Vance and the planning staff. We will notify those residents as far as development. If we're able to go forward, we'll notify them so they'll have a chance to understand what's happening. Nobody likes surprises. The anything else? We're to put it in perspective, I think we're the 9300 block of Broadway, south of the 9300 block of Broadway. One of the things is, I'm sorry it's difficult to see on this, but on the east side and the west side of the open area, there's parking for guests, and I don't know the exact count. Do you know the exact count on that? They're close to 50 parking spaces for guests, and that's something we found that we like to provide. The yards in each of the units will be fenced in The interior units have 20 by 24 backyards. The perimeter units, the side units, have 15 by 24 backyards. We developed residences on the Parkway 2 years ago. Excuse me, David Weekley Homes built those units. They're being leased now. Pacific Coast Capital Partners is REIT that owns the property. They're very pleased with the whole development. Leasing is going quite well. The 3-bedroom units there leased for $2,450 a month. The 4-bedroom units leased for $2,805 a month. To put it in perspective, to qualify for rent there has to be on the smaller units a household income about $88,000. On the larger units, it needs to be a little over $100,000. Who they're seeing move in there are teachers, refinery workers, and medical center workers. So they have people coming and going locally as well as going down to the coast and then going into the medical center. Families, individuals, and couples, just what you would think, just a cross-section of a typical residential base. The other thing I want to point out about the site, in the amenity area, the developer builds an amenity center with a pool. They would do that here. What we've proposed in the detention area is to keep that as a dry pond. So it works as a detention facility, but it also serves as an open space recreation facility. You guys can picture some of the fields on the south side of Magnolia. As you come from 288 west, it would function like those. We've talked briefly with Vance Wiley about the construction of our lane, all the way to our south property line, from our south property line up to Broadway, and the same thing about improving Smith Road, and we would do that down to the south property line as well. And by the way, Smith Road developed out does not connect into Silver Lake. The roadway easement stops before it goes into the residential neighborhood. I believe the plan for our lane is to be a minor collector that would come all the way down to Fight Road eventually. We would build it from our south property line up to Broadway. To accomplish that, we would ask the city consider helping us establish a public improvement district to help compensate for that work to be done, the cost of that work. I will mention that the road right-of-way for Smith Lane, for Smith Road is in place. It's a 60-foot right-of-way. However, I'm not sure that the full 60-foot right-of-way for our lane is in place yet. I know there is right-of-way there, but I'm just not sure it's 60 feet. If I have anything else, any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks. This time I'd like to send it over to you, Commissioner Eisenberg.
Thank you. In lieu of time, I'll be brief, which is hard for me if y'all know me. Many times I've probably said this. There's not a lot of land left in Pearland that makes sense for a multifamily or a townhome site. If you'd asked me before the meeting or 2 weeks ago, pick me 3 sites in Pearland, this would have been one of them. I think it's a perfect transition zone to go from GB to the residential, even though that residential is not part of the city, it's in an ETJ, still to protect, I guess, character. This makes a lot of sense to me. I also prefer the traditional townhomes, or I'm sorry, the BTR product rather than the traditional multifamily. I think it makes a lot of sense. Variances I'm okay with. I did not get into detail with them when I was studying this, so my apologies. And also a comment that I've made to the applicant prior when he was looking at some land on McHard Road, that the site that he's developing or has developed on Fight Road and Cullen, I drive past that site every day. I've never seen a cleaner construction site, so I was appreciative of that. There was never any mud on the road or nails or dirt or cement, anything like that. So I appreciated that very much. That's my comments.
Commissioner Como, most of my questions were answered during the presentation. I don't know if I missed it. Was a TIA, has it been performed yet?
Not yet. We will.
So with this density, I'm assuming that'd be about.
Raj, has there been a traffic impact analysis done at the intersections? I don't know.
I would assume maybe 1,500, 2,000 trips per day is probably appropriate for this size development. Do we also know the timeline on the Fight Road connection?
Not about the Fight Road connection, but TIA was done by TxDOT for the signal warrant. This development will require another TIA because that was done without considering the added volume. So TIA will require for this development to happen. That will check the intersection at Smith Broadway and Over Broadway, two of those intersections.
And the last thing, I'm all for diversity of housing. I think it's needed in the community. Just don't know if teachers would be able to afford to live here. Maybe administrators, principals, but teachers might be a little stretched.
Commissioner Hendricks here. If I had to rent, I would prefer to rent a townhome over an apartment. I think the location makes sense. Although ultimately, it'd be nice if there could be home ownership in townhomes. We don't have a lot of that product, but I understand too that maybe the math just doesn't pencil. The product just doesn't work. The only other thing that I think would be very valuable in this case, because it's high density and I see a lot of pet ownership, is maybe a dog park or something like that, just so that people have somewhere to. I mean, I don't know how big your yards are, so I don't see but that'd be the only thing I think would be helpful in this density. As far as, other than that, I don't have any other comments.
And I've mistakenly left that out. There is a dog park just south of the pool area.
Great.
All right.
And I will say it, in the past, we've talked about platting this as a single lot rather than individually fee simple lots. And we would certainly do that if that's what the city needs us to do.
Well, I could get on board with something like that, but as far as the townhouse, I'm not a big fan of this build to rent. $2,800, somebody can go out and buy a home, and this particular area over there, I don't know, 20 acre, you're not going to get the density over there that you're going to get here with the townhomes and stuff, as far as building homes or anything like that. But we just turned one down over on what was the name of that street? McHard Road, and it was a build to rent. I would rather see somebody take ownership of something. And but if it comes before us and stuff, I'll give it consideration as far as the materials that you're building it out of and such as that. So that's back to you, Mayor.
Thank you. And I'd like to start a conversation with Councilmember Patel. Questions?
In essence of time, and last time I got scolded for taking up all the time, so I'm going to start and defer to Mr. Koza on that end, and we'll work our way this way.
I'm fine with anything. If anybody in the middle, we had plenty of people not do it. But I appreciate the offer, so go ahead, you can start in the middle.
Councilmember Byron.
All right, I'll jump in. That's fine. I agree with a lot of what was said. The location makes sense. The product makes sense. We always hear about the missing middle in the housing, and I think this has an opportunity to meet that. The only thing that does concern me is I understand where you're looking for some of these variances because you're trying to maximize the density on the project. I think you might be trying to over maximize the density on the project where you basically just have a detention pond and a playground, and you're going to have 100 and something plus units. I'd like to see that 300-foot dwelling to open space remain and reconfigure this to where people have easy access to some open space in their area. I'd also like to see a little bit more, I know parkland is part of the development, so sometimes it's easier to pay a fee rather than create the property, but it kind of defeats the purpose of the parkland requirement when we do that. So I'd like to see a little bit of consideration there. I don't have any problem with the detention being considered part of your open space, as long as it's amenitized, walking trails, lights, benches, things that make it more than just a detention pond. And I think you guys are already headed that way, so I appreciate it. Build to rent, not my favorite, but I understand there's a market for it, and we do talk about market driving decisions frequently up here, so I'm okay with heading that direction as long as we can make that work. Asking for a PID to do the road improvements, I'm not sure we're going to be able to pull that together. We'd have to look and see how that all works for that. I know we've done that in the past, but that involved a whole bunch of different property owners, and I believe, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, the PID that we created, the property owners are actually paying for the improvements in their property sales. So it's not the city paying for it, so I'm not sure how a PID would work in this environment where it would be one piece of property and you're not planning on selling it, so there's not really any way for the city to get their dollars back on that. Otherwise, I think that pretty well covers things. Caught me off guard. I wasn't ready, Mr. Koza, but thank you. No problem.
If I could just interject for 1 second,
Yes, ma'am.
council member. This is going to be our private common open space, and the applicant will still be required to pay parkland dedication in lieu of parkland because it's under 20 acres. So the city of Pearland will still get funds for their parkland. This will be the private space for this amenity.
Yes, ma'am. And thank you for answering that. I did remember my last thing. On the townhome item that Commissioner Eisenberg talked about before, I brought it up. I don't see it delineated here. Drainage between structures when they're this closely compacted to each other gets to be very, very challenging if you've only got 3 or 4 feet to create a swell and move water inland to your detention pond. So I'd like to see some good consideration put in.
These are attached units with 15 feet between buildings.
15 feet between buildings. Okay, that's what I couldn't quite line out. So each one of those spaces is
Sorry,
15 foot wide.
it's hard to see on this.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Councilmember Kate.
Yes, thank you. The number 4, it says the maximum gross site area developed shall have a minimum gross site area of 40 acres, and y'all are asking for 20 acres. It feels like a big difference. And looking at this, they do look kind of smashed together. You said 15 feet between each one. That doesn't translate to this picture. And I also don't love rent to own. Is there, I mean build to rent, you know what I meant. I'm sorry, build to rent. I see the office on here. Will that office be there always? Will it always be managed? Or is it just a leasing office and then?
It's an amenity center. It does have a leasing office, but it has a place for the community to meet occasionally. It's not a big building or anything like that, but it's a permanent facility.
There will be management to take care of the property.
Full time on site.
I had one other thing, but I can't think of it right now. I like the fact that it's managed, but thank you. Go ahead, Rick.
Councilmember Patel.
Sorry.
You sure, Rick?
Yes, I'm good.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. I just want to make sure. Mr. Stuckey, thank you for coming back. I do remember you, if you remember me. Back in 2023, you bought some land on Fight, as Commissioner Hendricks had said. And my question back then to you, when I believe it was Jennifer Evans was with you, and that was her property, or she was somehow involved with it. And my question then to you was, sir, are you going to rent or sell those? And you said you didn't know that property at that time. And in my heart, I wish I had $1 million. I would have bet that you were going to rent it. And so that's always been a stinger for me, okay? Now, when I look at this project, I understand what you're trying to do. I have to consider your neighbors around you. They have built some really nice homes. And I think it would be hard for them to see such a compact, squeezed in development. And I believe a while back ago, and correct me, Vince, if I'm wrong, didn't this development come back with less units, like 150 or something before? How many?
153.
153. So you added more units, is that correct?
This is our first time to bring this to the council.
Okay, that was the other one on the card. Okay.
And Councilman, let me clarify something. When I told you that I didn't know, I didn't know.
Okay.
We were working with D.R. Horton, who would have built for sale. We were working with David Weekley, who would have built for rent. We ended up, subsequent to the meeting, entering into a contract with David Weekley Homes.
Okay, and I do appreciate that clarification, sir. And I'll tell you, every time I drive on 288, whether I go south or north, it doesn't make me happy with those cookie cutters. Every building's white, or the sidings and just compact. I think it's not fair to the property owners that have built really nice homes around you. So I would ask a couple of things. And I'm not opposed to your development by any means. What I'm asking you is, if you have enough votes, you don't need to worry about what I'm asking. But if you don't, what I'm asking is, you consider basically putting some kind of barrier, a concrete wall fence or something around your development.
A little bit.
Two, I think you need to reduce the amount of housing you guys are trying to squeeze in here. And I'm not in favor for all the variances. I know your colleague mentioned that the UDC code rewrite may be addressing some of this, and that's fine, but at the moment, it's not. And it's not for sure that we're going to approve that UDC rewrite the way it's coming out, right, or recommended. And so for me, this project just doesn't feel quality. I think it needs to be more. You need to show us the finish of what the exterior is going to look like and how you guys are going to maintain it long term.
Have you visited Skymore Pearland?
I have not, but I have driven by it.
Would. Before you ask us and tell us that we don't have a nice looking product, I would ask that you go see it.
No, I 100% agree, Mr. Stuckey. I think everything looks good for the first 10 years. Would you not agree with that? If it's new build, I hope it looks nice. That's my opinion. But I think what I'm worried about is long term, right?
That's why I wish you would go take a look.
Okay, I'll be happy to do that.
Product.
Okay, so my point to you is, long-term wise, how are the residents around there going to feel about this product, right? Because they own that. People are going to rent it. There is a difference between care of a property when you're renting it and when you're owning it. And so I will guarantee you, when this goes out to public, and this council is full, you have council members who are already struggling with it. So I think it's really important that you understand that.
And I hope that the council understands that the owner of the property is a $24 billion REIT that has properties all over the country, and they are first class. That's why we work with them.
And again, great. And I would say it's also in their interest for a bottom line. That's why they have $24 billion. Unfortunately, we don't have that. We struggle just in our budgets to enforce our codes. And I appreciate what you're saying. And I appreciate that,
Councilman, they
information.
didn't wake up. They were not born with $24 billion. They have earned it. They have a quality product. They have a great reputation. David Weekley Homes is the premier privately held builder in the country. That's why we deal with them. We're not here to bring a trashy development to your community. That's
And
not what
again,
we do.
I'm not saying you're bringing it. All I'm saying is we're worried about the future and what my residents around there are going to feel. So I certainly understand where you're coming from as a developer, but I understand where I'm coming from as a council member. I had to respond to my constituents. So I'm going to do you a favor. Before you even send your notices, I will post it. And I will have them come and give you their opinion so you can hear really from them. How would you like that? That's a
How
fair.
many constituents do you have adjacent to our property?
I don't know. We'll find it because
You
they're
have
across
two.
the street, right? They're across the
two.
street as well. So I think it's important that you
Your
understand.
constituents are not in Silver Lake. That's in Brazoria County.
Sir, does it really matter whether it's ETJ? So just because they don't vote in my county or in my city doesn't mean that they don't count. Their vote or their voice shouldn't be heard.
And we told you that we would invite them. What else can we do?
No, you can, but I will personally make sure they are notified, and I will do you a favor, and I will make sure they hear about this project, and let them come and tell you.
That's perfect.
Right? Whether they get notification, they understand what is happening, or whether they hear, hey, this is what's going to be proposed, give us your feedback, right? And let them come and tell you how they feel about it. Would that be fair?
That's very fair.
And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're not citizens of Pearland. They live in that area, and they will be impacted. Is that fair to say?
Very fair.
Okay. Thank you.
And to go back and answer a question that was asked earlier, the development is fenced in, will be fenced in. So and also, I cannot help but agree with you about the project that we see on 288 with all white, all the buildings are white. That's not us. And that is not something that we would put on the ground.
And I appreciate that. And that's why I look forward to your detailed proposal of what this product is going to look like. Fair?
Good deal.
Thank you.
Yep. Councilmember Cade.
I was going to ask about renderings, but Councilmember Byram said this is a preliminary meeting, so we shouldn't have them. So,
yep.
Thank you.
Councilmember Koza.
Thank you, Mayor. So the management on premise you answered. As far as I know, when this was brought to us before, I am by no means in the development space and don't know the vernacular that well, but I do remember at the time that Mayor Cole said that it would be better for one entire piece of property. I don't know the reasoning behind it. I don't know, maybe you can enlighten us a little bit on that, but from what I remember, that was one thing that we were asking you to do as one solid lot. And so for whatever the reasoning that is, I feel
that's fine. We agree with that. And the purpose behind that is to maintain control and management under one entity rather than individual homeowners.
Okay. That's like I said, I just remember that from the time before. As far as a PID goes, I don't know the setup and how that is entailed, but I would be open to see if that's something we could do or not do from that perspective. As far as I know, the last time when you came, there was some talk about gates, not gates. What is your thought on, is it a gated community, not gated community?
Sorry, I missed.
Gates on the property.
It'll be gated. Our intent is to be gated here.
Okay, all right, fair enough. And then one thing that I'd just kind of like to address that seems to bring a negative impact from this dais, and it's rents. One thing that I'd like to bring up, ownership doesn't always bring quality people. I could tell you we have one neighborhood that had a park, and the park got aged, deteriorated, and if Carrie Capers was here, could tell you that they came to the city and wanted us to take over the park. That's home ownership. In a neighborhood, owns it, and people don't want to pay for what they bought into. We have one council member and an ex-mayor that lives in a neighborhood that has a detention pond to the tune of about $300,000 home ownership. Came time to a vote, they said no. They're willing to sit in their neighborhood, and when that detention fails and floods their neighbors and everyone in the neighborhood, they're okay with that. That's home ownership. So when we start talking about this negative connotation with rent and REITs, yeah, they're a big company. Yeah, they made it in life and have gone and done it. But sit there and tell me that home ownership means something. I'd like to invite any one of you to come swim in the pool next to my house. I guarantee you none of you'd get in it. Not one. Because the first thing you'd probably get is green, black slime all over you. And hope like anything you didn't get a brain-eating amoeba, because that's what's growing in the pool. So sometimes rent's not as bad as you think it is, especially if it's quality product.
Thank you. So thank you for coming to present this. I just hopefully can round out this conversation and say you have a lot of information that has been provided. Also in this regular session that's coming up, there's a discussion on an open forum about multifamily. So I would encourage you to either stay, listen, and participate in the upcoming months, because it's a significant issue in our community. As Councilmember Patel put it, there's a lot of concern, and all it takes is one notice, and there'll be an abundance of residents sitting here asking you why, what, and when. And I will say, yes, to your point about renters and owners, we need to take a different approach on how we evaluate how Pearland is going to develop. I think bringing the proposal up to the forefront is going to be important, but at the end of the day, if none of these homes are for sale, then what makes it or differentiates it from an apartment complex? It's multifamily. Whether it's spread or vertical, it's still the same. And I think in order for you to be successful in making this proposal and pitch to the members up here, not only distinguishing this product, but understanding how that's going to benefit this community, either financially or to the quality of life, will depend on if this project gets approved. So I just want to add that. So I hope everyone had an opportunity to speak, because I want to make sure you go back with the homework that you need. Councilman Fernandez, yes.
Mayor, thank you. I just want to make a comment. I just want to thank Member Patel for being considerate to your colleague here. So I appreciate you bringing that up earlier, and I just want to say thank you for that. That's all.
Absolutely. So, yes. Councilmember Eccles.
Sir, thank you for bringing the product. For me, it's multifamily rental. It's good, bad, and indifferent. I think the biggest thing that I have is you don't have a 3-story looking down on somebody else's yard. I drove by because I knew we were having this workshop today. I drove by the land, and as I was coming down Smith Road, I saw there were some what appeared to be pipeline construction north of you.
Correct. Can you? Is it a gas pipeline that's being improved?
Gas line being improved or repaired?
I think they're installing new pipeline. Mr. Viktorin is more familiar with it than I am. That's not on our property. That's
it's north of. It's north of, so he can address that question in a moment. Also, there's Senate Bill 15 that talks about small lots that's coming down the pipe. you're wanting to address my concern on Smith Road improvements. I personally like the concept. The townhome right next to each other, I can deal with, because that's what makes it appear to be vertical apartments, or horizontal apartments rather. So I have a little bit of that, but Member Koza was talking about rental versus owned. I happen to own a townhome that has an 18-inch build line on one side and a 12-foot build line on the other side. The house I have on a corner. On the other side of me, there's an 18-inch build line in the back of their house. It is next to mine with the 15, 20-foot build line. And then it just goes alternate. So in between the houses, you have, other than the corner houses, you have 10 to 15 feet behind one house, where in another house you have 18 inches. And I said this to say it's an owned community. However, owners rent. The renter next door to me allowed his grass to get, weeds were about 12 to 14 inches. I get an email from the homeowners association saying that I haven't mowed my grass. I take the picture of it and send it and say, it is not mine. I get a response saying, it is yours, it's growing up from your rocks, because I have no scape. So yes, just because you own that and have a great homeowners association doesn't mean people's going to take care of their property. Personally, with you having a rental property with a manager on duty to make sure that all properties kept up, especially on the outside.
That's right.
I think I would have to look my constituents up that says no more apartments. I think I can explain this is not an apartment. So thank you for bringing. So the question of the pipeline, I was just concerned about that, because the pipeline below, how close
Yes, the expansion has required Houston Pipeline to lower the existing pipeline. So they are physically lowering it, and the representative told me that he thought it was going to be the neighborhood of 15 feet deeper than what it is right now. And they are lowering it as it crosses 518 and as it crosses Smith Road as well. And that's what they're doing.
Okay, that was just curious, just a question. Thank you for answering. Thank
All
you.
right. Absolutely. I think that concludes all the questions. And
Mayor, if I may
sorry.
clarify,
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Excuse me.
Nope.
On the PID, we talked about a PID previously. Please understand, that's not city money. City administrated, but it's not city money. It's developer money. So it is private funds. The city, in some cities, they've used their economic development committee as the PID board, something like that. But it is developer money, not PID, not city money. The city has no obligation with it.
Thank you for the clarification. Okay. I think if there's no other additional comment or discussion, I'd like to adjourn this joint workshop at 6:13 p.m. Thanks.